I'd been staring at the same flash designs on the wall for 20 minutes, pretending to decide, when I already knew exactly what I wanted and exactly where I wanted it. The problem wasn't the tattoo. The problem was that I'd been coming to this shop every Saturday for 3 months, always finding some excuse to stop by, always hoping to catch a glimpse of him through the window, and today I'd finally worked up the courage to actually walk inside. His name was Ezra. I'd learned that from his Instagram, which I'd found after seeing it printed on a business card tacked to the community board at the coffee shop where I worked. Ezra Chen, tattoo artist, specialising in fine line work and geometric designs. In his photos he had this quiet confidence, dark hair usually tied back in a bun, arms covered in intricate ink that I'd spent embarrassing amounts of time studying on my phone screen late at night. Now he was standing 3 feet away from me, and I was trying to act like a normal human being instead of someone whose heart was attempting to break through his ribcage. "Take your time," he said, his voice low and unhurried. "Most people rush this part, but it's permanent, you know. You should be sure." I nodded, still staring at the wall, hyper-aware of his presence beside me. He smelled like sandalwood and ink, and I could feel the warmth radiating from his body even though we weren't touching. "I think I know what I want," I finally said, turning to face him. Up close he was even more striking than in his photos. Sharp jawline, dark eyes that seemed to notice everything, a small scar through his left eyebrow that I suddenly wanted to know the story behind. "Yeah? What are you thinking?" He leaned against the counter, giving me his full attention, and I felt my mouth go dry. A compass rose. Simple, clean lines, nothing too elaborate. He smiled, and something in my chest tightened. "Nice choice. Classic but personal. Where do you want it?" This was the moment I'd been both anticipating and dreading. I'd rehearsed this conversation in my head a dozen times, but now that we were here, actually doing this, my carefully planned words scattered like leaves. "My ribs," I said. "Left side, kinda high up, below my armpit." Ezra nodded thoughtfully. "Good placement. Fair warning, though. Ribs are pretty painful. First tattoo?" "Yeah. Is it that obvious?" "Little bit," he said, but his tone was kind, almost teasing. "You've got that look. Excited but terrified." "Accurate," I admitted, and he laughed. God, his laugh. I wanted to record it, keep it, replay it whenever I needed to remember what happiness sounded like. "Come on back," he said, gesturing toward his station. "Let's get you set up and we can figure out the exact size and placement." I followed him through the shop, past 2 other artists working on clients, into his space in the back corner. His station was meticulous, everything organised and clean, with a vinyl player in the corner currently spinning something low and jazzy. The walls around his area were covered with his artwork, designs that range from delicate botanical illustrations to bold geometric patterns. "You can take your shirt off and have a seat," he said, pulling on black latex gloves. "I'll draw up a few size options and we can see what feels right." I'd prepared myself for this part, or so I thought. I'd worn my nicest jeans, made sure I'd showered twice that morning, even done a few extra sets at the gym the past week like that would somehow make a difference. But actually pulling my shirt over my head while Ezra watched, clinical and professional, made me feel more exposed than I'd ever felt in my life. I sat down on the leather chair, trying to position myself casually, like I did this all the time, like I wasn't intensely aware of his eyes on my skin. "Okay," he said, rolling his stool closer. "Show me about where you're thinking." I reached up and touched my left ribs, high up, just below my armpit. "Around here, I think?" He leaned in, studying the area, and I stopped breathing. He was so close I could see the flecks of amber in his dark eyes, could count the individual eyelashes, could feel his breath on my skin. "Can I?" he asked, his hand hovering near my ribs. I nodded, not trusting my voice. His fingers touched my skin, gentle and sure, tracing an invisible circle on my ribs. "Right here?" he asked. "Or a little lower?" "There's good," I managed to say, even though every nerve ending in my body had suddenly focused on the exact spots where his fingertips pressed against me. His hands were warm, surprisingly soft despite the calluses I could feel on his fingertips. "Cool," he said, but he didn't move his hand right away. For just a second, maybe 2, his fingers lingered on my ribs, and I swear I felt his thumb move just slightly, almost like a caress. Then he pulled back, professional mask firmly in place. "I'll sketch a few sizes. You've got good skin for this, by the way. Should heal really clean." He turned to his desk and I tried to remember how to breathe normally. My ribs still tingled where he'd touched me, like his fingerprints had left invisible marks on my skin. While he worked, I studied him, The way he held the pencil, the slight furrow between his eyebrows when he concentrated, the unconscious way he bit his lower lip when he was focused on getting a line just right. He'd rolled up his sleeves, and I could see the full extent of the tattoos covering his forearms, intricate mandalas and sacred geometry flowing together in a way that seemed both planned and organic. "So what's the significance?" he asked without looking up. The compass rose. "Honestly, I've been feeling kind of lost lately, like I'm not sure which direction I'm supposed to be going." The words came out more honest than I'd intended. Maybe it was easier to be truthful when he wasn't looking directly at me. "I get that," he said quietly. "Sometimes we need a reminder that it's okay to not have all the answers. The compass doesn't tell you where to go, it just shows you the options." I looked at him, surprised. That's exactly it. He glanced up, meeting my eyes, and smiled. Not the professional smile from before, but something softer, more real. "I have a theory that the best tattoos are the ones that mean something different every time you look at them. Like, today it might be about feeling lost, but in 5 years, it might remind you of the time you found your way. You're kind of a philosopher for a tattoo artist." "Tattoo artist/philosopher, he corrected, grinning. "It's a competitive market. Gotta diversify." I laughed, and just like that, some of the tension in my shoulders released. We fell into easy conversation while he worked, talking about music, about the neighborhood, about the weird customers he got sometimes. He told me about the guy who'd wanted a portrait of his pet snake, and I told him about the customer at the coffee shop who ordered a cappuccino with ice every single day, then complained that it was cold. "Wait, you work at Groundwork?" he asked. "The place on 5th? Yeah, why?" "I go there all the time, like probably too much. I'm pretty sure I'm single-handedly keeping you guys in business with my cold brew addiction." My heart stuttered. "What time do you usually come in?" "Mornings, around 8 before I open up here." "Why, have you seen me?" I had seen him. I'd seen him at least a dozen times, had memorized his order, had made sure to be the one to take it whenever I spotted him in line. Medium cold brew, extra ice, no sugar. He always said thank you, always made eye contact, and I'd spent hours analysing those brief interactions, wondering if the way he smiled at me meant anything, or if he was just polite to everyone. "Maybe once or twice," I lied, trying to sound casual. He looked at me for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression, then turned back to his sketches. Huh, small world. He finished 3 different sizes, and we spent the next 15 minutes holding them up to my ribs, debating proportions. Each time required him to touch me again, his fingers pressing the stencil to my skin, adjusting the placement, and each time I had to remind myself to act normal, to not lean into his touch, to not make this weird. "This one," I finally decided, pointing to the medium size. "It feels right." "Good choice," he said. "Okay, let me get this transferred and we can get started. You ready?" As ready as I'll ever be. He prepared the stencil, and when he pressed it to my ribs, smoothing it carefully with his fingers, I closed my eyes and tried to think about anything other than how good his hands felt on my skin. He smelled like sandalwood, and something else, something clean and masculine that made me want to lean closer. "All right, check it out in the mirror," he said, stepping back. I stood and walked to the full-length mirror on the wall. The design looked perfect, exactly what I'd envisioned, placed precisely where I'd wanted it. "It's perfect," I said. "Yeah?" He came to stand beside me, examining his work in the mirror. Our eyes met in the reflection, and for a moment neither of us looked away. There was something in his gaze, something that made my pulse quicken. But before I could analyse it, he turned back to his station. "Let's do this," he said. I lay back on the chair, positioning myself so he had easy access to my ribs. He adjusted the overhead light, tested his machine, and I watched his face as he worked. The intense concentration, the slight pursing of his lips. "Okay, here comes the first line," he warned. "Deep breath in." The pain was sharp and immediate, like a hot scratch being drawn across my skin, but it wasn't unbearable. What was unbearable was the intimacy of it all. His face inches from my body, his hand pressed firmly against my skin to keep it taut. The buzz of the machine creating a cocoon of sound around us. His other hand, the one not holding the machine, rested on my ribs, his thumb moving in small, unconscious circles against my skin. "You good?" he asked after the first few lines. "Yeah," I said, my voice rougher than I'd intended. "I'm good. Let me know if you need a break." We fell into a rhythm. The pain became almost meditative, and I found myself relaxing into it, hyper-focused on every point of contact between us. His hands on my skin, the pressure of his touch, the way he occasionally had to lean in closer, his breath warm against my ribs. "So why tattoo artistry?" I asked, partly to distract myself, partly because I genuinely wanted to know everything about him. He paused, wiping excess ink from my skin. "I like the permanence of it, I guess. In a world where everything's temporary, where people are constantly changing their minds and reinventing themselves, there's something beautiful about someone saying, 'This matters enough to me that I want it on my body forever.' Plus, I get to be part of people's stories, you know? Every tattoo has a story." "What's yours?" I gestured to his arms. "The story behind all of this?" He smiled, returning to his work. "That's a long story. Most of them don't have deep meanings, honestly. I just like the art. But there are a few that matter." He paused, then added quietly, "There's one that reminds me of the first time I admitted something important to myself." I wanted to ask what, wanted to push, but something in his tone told me this wasn't the time. Instead, I said, "Tell me about the others." He did. As he worked, he told me about the mandala on his forearm that he'd gotten after his grandmother died, about the geometric pattern on his shoulder that he'd designed himself when he first started apprenticing, about the tiny constellation behind his ear that matched his sister's. His voice was soothing, and I found myself getting lost in it, in the stories, in the feeling of his hands on my skin. Time seemed to slow down and speed up simultaneously. Sometimes minutes felt like hours, the pain sharp and demanding, and other times I'd lose track entirely, so focused on the sound of his voice or the warmth of his touch that I forgot where I was. "We're about halfway," he said, sitting back to assess his work. "How are you holding up?" "Good," I said. "Actually, yeah, I'm good," he smiled. "You're doing great. Most people are squirming by now. Want some water or anything?" "I'm okay." He nodded and went back to work, but something had shifted in the air between us. Maybe it was the time we'd spent together, or the intimacy of the process, or the stories we'd shared. But the professional distance he'd maintained at the beginning had eroded. His touches lingered a little longer, his thumb traced patterns on my skin between passes with the machine, and once, when he had to lean across me to reach a different angle, I felt him pause, his chest pressed against my arm before pulling back quickly. "Sorry," he muttered. "It's fine," I said, and our eyes met. Held. Something passed between us, something electric and terrifying and exciting all at once. He cleared his throat and returned to the tattoo, but I could see the slight flush on his cheeks, could see the way his hand trembled just slightly before he steadied it. My mind was racing. Was I imagining this? The tension, the lingering touches, the way he kept finding excuses to maintain contact, or was this just how tattoo artists worked? Professional and thorough, and I was reading into it because I wanted so badly for it to mean something. "Can I ask you something?" he said suddenly, not looking up from his work. "Sure." "Why did you really choose this shop? There are at least 5 other tattoo places closer to Groundwork." My heart hammered against my ribs. "I liked your work. Your Instagram portfolio is really good." "You looked me up?" "I saw your card at the coffee shop," I said, which was true, even if it wasn't the whole truth. He was quiet for a moment, the machine buzzing between us. Then, so quietly I almost didn't hear it, he said, "I've noticed you, at the coffee shop. You always make my drink perfectly." I didn't know what to say to that. My brain had short-circuited somewhere between "I've noticed you" and "perfectly." "I kept meaning to actually introduce myself," he continued, still focused on the tattoo, not meeting my eyes. "But I always chickened out. Figured you probably got hit on all the time by customers, didn't want to be that guy." "You're not," I said quickly. "That guy, I mean. You're not." He glanced up at me, and the vulnerability in his expression made my chest ache. "No? No." We stared at each other, the machine still buzzing in his hand, my heart thundering so loud I was sure he could hear it. The moment stretched between us, full of everything we weren't saying, everything we were both too scared to say. Then he smiled, soft and genuine, and returned to the tattoo. Good to know. The rest of the session passed in a blur of sensation and emotion. Every touch felt charged now, deliberate. When he had to stretch my skin, his fingers pressed firmly into my ribs. I swear I felt him caress the skin with his thumb. When he leaned close to work on a detailed section, I could feel his breath on my skin, warm and steady. and when our eyes met, which happened more and more frequently, there was no mistaking the heat there, the want, the possibility. Finally, after what felt like both forever and no time at all, he sat back and turned off the machine. "Done," he said. "Want to see?" I stood on shaky legs and walked to the mirror. The compass rose was beautiful, clean lines and perfect symmetry, exactly what I'd wanted. But more than that, it was a reminder of this moment, this day, this feeling of standing on the edge of something terrifying and wonderful. "It's perfect," I said, and I meant it. "Yeah?" He came to stand beside me again, and this time, when our eyes met in the mirror, neither of us looked away. "I'm glad." He bandaged it carefully, his touches gentle and sure, explaining the aftercare process in detail. I tried to focus on his words, on the instructions about washing and moisturizing, but all I could think about was that this was ending, that in a few minutes I'd have to leave, and I didn't know if I'd have the courage to come back, to turn this moment into something more. "All set," he said, stepping back. "You can put your shirt back on." I did, moving slowly, trying to make the moment last. When I was dressed, I turned to face him, and he was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "So?" he said. "That'll be 200. Right? Yeah." I pulled out my wallet, handed him my card, watched as he processed the payment. This was it. The moment was ending. Soon I'd walk out that door and this would just be a memory, a what if, a story about the tattoo artist I'd had a crush on who maybe, possibly felt something too. He handed me back my card, along with a care instruction sheet. "Remember, keep it clean and moisturized. Come back in 2 weeks and I'll check on the healing, make sure everything looks good. No charge for the follow-up." "Okay," I said. "Thanks, really, it's perfect." "I'm glad." He paused, then added, "I'll see you at groundwork." "Yeah, definitely." I turned to leave, my hand on the door, when I heard him say my name. I'd written it on the intake form, but hearing it in his voice made something flutter in my chest. "Yeah?" He was standing there, hands shoved in his pockets, looking uncertain in a way that made him seem younger, more vulnerable. "Would you maybe want to grab coffee sometime? Like actual coffee, not just me ordering cold brew while you're working?" The smile that broke across my face was so wide it almost hurt. "I'd really like that." "Yeah?" His whole face lit up, and God, he was beautiful. "Yeah, I'm off tomorrow at 2. "I know a place," he said. "Not groundwork. Somewhere we can actually talk." "It's a date," I said, then immediately worried I'd been too presumptuous. "I mean, if you want it to be. It doesn't have to be. It could just be coffee, as friends, or—" "A date sounds good," he interrupted, grinning now. "A date sounds really good." I left the shop walking on air, my ribs throbbing with fresh pain that I barely noticed. All I could think about was the way he'd looked at me, the way his fingers had felt on my skin, the way he'd said my name. The compass rose on my ribs felt warm beneath the bandage, a permanent reminder of the day everything changed. That night, lying in bed, I kept replaying every moment. His hand on my ribs, asking where I wanted it. The way he'd traced that invisible circle on my skin. The hours we'd spent together, the stories we'd shared, the gradual dissolution of the professional distance between us. The way he'd admitted he'd noticed me, that he'd wanted to introduce himself, that he'd been just as nervous as I was. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Hey, it's Ezra. Got your number from the intake form, hope that's okay. Just wanted to make sure you're doing all right. First tattoos can be rough the first night." I saved his number immediately, my heart racing. "I'm good. Thanks for checking. And yeah, totally okay that you texted." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Good. See you tomorrow at 2. There's this place in Silver Lake, best lavender lattes in the city. That okay?" "Perfect, can't wait." "Me neither." I stared at those 2 words for a long time, smiling like an idiot in the darkness of my room. Me neither. Such simple words, but they meant everything. They meant he was just as excited as I was, just as nervous, just as hopeful. The next day, I changed my outfit 4 times before settling on jeans and a soft grey sweater. I showed up 10 minutes early and found him already there, sitting at a corner table, 2 lavender lattes waiting. He stood when he saw me, and the smile on his face made my knees weak. "Hey," he said. "Hey." We sat down, and for a moment we just looked at each other, grinning like idiots. "This is weird, right?" he said. "I feel like I know you already, but also like I don't know you at all. Good weird or bad weird?" Definitely good weird. We talked for 3 hours. The coffee shop closed around us, and we moved to a park nearby, walking slowly as the sun set, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about growing up in San Francisco, about coming out to his family when he was 19, about the first time he knew he was attracted to men. I told him about my small-town childhood, about moving to the city for college and never leaving, about the slow realization that the way I felt about my best friend in high school wasn't just friendship. "When did you know?" he asked. "For sure, I mean. Honestly, I think I always knew, somewhere deep down, but admitting it to myself, that took longer. There was this moment, senior year of college, when I was at a party, and this guy smiled at me and I just knew that I wanted to kiss him, knew that I'd been lying to myself for years, knew that I couldn't keep pretending." I paused. "What about you?" "I was 15, he said. "There was this boy in my art class and I couldn't stop drawing him. My sketchbook was full of his face, his hands, the way his hair fell across his forehead. My sister found the sketchbook one day and just looked at me and said, 'You know you're gay, right?' And I did. I'd known for a while, I just needed someone to say it out loud." "Did you ever tell him? The boy you were drawing?" "No, he was straight, and I was a coward. But I kept one of those drawings. It's in a box somewhere. A reminder of the first time I let myself want something I wasn't supposed to want." We ended up at his apartment, not for anything physical, but because neither of us wanted the day to end. He showed me more of his artwork, sketchbooks filled with designs and ideas, and I told him about the novel I'd been trying to write for 3 years, the one I was too scared to let anyone read. "I'll show you mine if you show me yours," he said. And something about the way he said it, the playfulness mixed with genuine vulnerability, made me fall a little bit harder. I showed him the first chapter on my phone, watching nervously as he read. When he looked up, his eyes were bright. "This is really good," he said. "Like, actually good. Why haven't you finished it?" "Scared, I guess. Scared it won't be good enough. Scared people will hate it. Scared it won't matter." "It matters," he said firmly. "Even if only one person reads it, even if that person is just me, it matters." Something shifted between us then, the air growing heavier, charged. We were sitting on his couch, close enough that I could feel the heat of his body, could see the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. "Can I tell you something?" he said quietly. "Anything. I've been thinking about you for months. Every time you made my coffee, every time you smiled at me, I wanted to ask you out. But I was terrified. Terrified I was reading it wrong. Terrified you were straight. Terrified of ruining the one good part of my morning routine." "I'm not straight," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I know that now." He smiled, but there was nervousness in it. "But I'm still terrified." "Of what?" "Of this. Of how much I already like you. Of how right this feels." I reached out and took his hand, threading our fingers together. His palm was warm against mine, calloused and strong. "I'm terrified too, but I think the good things are always a little scary." He looked down at our joined hands, then back up at me, and the expression on his face was so open, so vulnerable, that it made my chest ache. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. "Please." He leaned in slowly, giving me time to change my mind, but I didn't want to. I wanted this more than I'd wanted anything in a long time. When his lips met mine, soft and tentative, it felt like coming home. Like every compass point aligning at once, showing me exactly where I was supposed to be. The kiss deepened, his hand coming up to cut my face, his thumb tracing my cheekbone. I reached up and threaded my fingers through his hair finally after months of imagining it, and it was softer than I'd dreamed. When we finally pulled apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. "I really like you," he whispered. "I really like you too." We spent the rest of the night on that couch, talking and kissing and laughing, learning the geography of each other, the way he smiled with his whole face when he was truly happy, the sound he made when I kissed the spot just below his ear, the way our bodies fit together, like we'd been designed for this, for each other. When I finally left, well past midnight, my lips were swollen and my heart was full. The tattoo on my ribs had stopped hurting, or maybe I just didn't notice the pain anymore, too focused on the ache in my chest that came from wanting someone this much, from the terrifying joy of having them want you back. 2 weeks later, I went back for the follow-up appointment. The tattoo had healed perfectly, the lines clean and crisp. Ezra examined it carefully, his professional mask back in place, but I could see the smile tugging at his lips. "Looks good," he said. "You took great care of it." I had good instructions. He looked up at me and the mask dropped. "Want to get dinner after this? There's this Thai place around the corner. I'd love that." As he rebandaged the tattoo, even though it didn't really need it anymore, his fingers lingered on my skin. I thought about that first day, about how terrified I'd been, about the way he'd asked where I wanted it and put his hand there to show me. How that simple touch had changed everything. The compass rose on my ribs wasn't about being lost anymore. It was about finding direction, about the courage to want something and reach for it, about the moment when two paths converge and become one. Total_char_count 24,847.